The chamber fell into an eerie silence. The representatives of the Galactic Concord, beings from 1,000 worlds, stared down at the humans, flesh and bone, standing at the center of the vast, cold hall. Captain Elias Harper, leader of the Terran delegation, swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. The gaunt faces of the Concord representatives were lit by the shimmering light of 1,000 holograms. Their forms were diverse: insectoid, crystalline, cephalopod-like, and even beings of pure energy. And yet, for all their apparent majesty, their eyes were filled with disdain. Humanity, the chairman of the Concord, a towering being of translucent scales, spoke with a voice that sounded like the rustling of wind through leaves. "You present your case, yet there is nothing here we find valuable. Your species is crude, impulsive, and your technology lacks the refinement of even the least advanced members of our union." Elias stood firm, his jaw clenched but his posture unwavering. He had expected this. He had known it from the moment Earth's request for entry had been submitted. They would never accept humans, not in their lofty, self-righteous eyes. "Our culture may not fit into your refined vision of the galaxy," Elias responded, his voice carrying with an edge of steel, "but that doesn't mean we don't belong. Humanity has fought wars, survived extinction, rebuilt from the ashes. We've defied every obstacle, and we will continue to do so." The insectoid representative hissed in amusement. "Survived, yes, but only by accident. You are a dangerous species, Captain Harper. Your people are reckless, emotional. You do not think long-term. You do not understand the balance of the cosmos." From across the room, a cold laugh echoed, belonging to a creature of shifting energies, its form constantly distorting. "You are no different than a child, playing with a fire you cannot control." Harper's fists tightened. They were right. Earth's history was full of bloodshed, mistakes, and chaos. But it was also filled with triumph, with growth. And that was exactly what the Concord didn't understand. Humans might be unpredictable, but they were capable of extraordinary feats when cornered. "I may not agree with your assessment," Harper said, his voice steady but simmering with defiance. "But you are wrong about one thing. We're not just survivors. We are builders. We will evolve. We will adapt. And if you reject us, you will find it is a mistake you will regret." The chairman raised one translucent hand, dismissing the notion with a casual flick. "Your words are meaningless. We have made our decision. You and your people have no place in the Galactic Concord." Harper felt his heart thundering in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. He could feel the eyes of the human delegation behind him, a mixture of pride and disbelief in their gaze. This was it. Earth's fate was sealed. The room's atmosphere shifted, the tension hanging thick in the air. The chairman continued, "Consider yourselves exiled. Banishment from interstellar communication and trade. Your species will no longer be acknowledged by the Galactic Concord. We are done here." The announcement rang in Harper's ears like a final death knell. And yet, despite the cold finality of the decision, something stirred within him, a spark that could never be extinguished. The humans had been cast aside, but they had been written off before. They had been underestimated, and that Captain Elias Harper knew would be their greatest strength. For years, the galaxy moved on without a second thought to Earth. The hum of interstellar politics continued, and the Galactic Concord expanded its influence, dealing with the endless array of alien species that sought to join its ranks. Humanity had been dismissed as irrelevant, a species too primitive to challenge the carefully crafted peace of the Concord. But on Earth, in the shadow of rejection, something else was happening. The news from the stars, broadcasted on every screen and shouted from every corner of the globe, was not met with defeat. No, humanity's response was much more dangerous. They vanished. At first, it was subtle. The spaceports, once bustling with the energy of interstellar trade, quieted. Ships that once set sail for distant systems simply didn't return. Communications with the outer colonies slowed, then ceased entirely. The Council of Earth's leaders gave no explanation. No grand speeches, just an unspoken understanding. Humanity had been cast out, and now they would take matters into their own hands. Under the surface, in the hidden facilities buried deep beneath the oceans and across frozen tundras, humanity began to prepare. A council of the best scientists, engineers, and military tacticians was formed, not to fight, but to build, to create something greater than anything the galaxy had seen before. The humans were alone, and they were angry. But more than that, they were determined. In secret, Earth's industries poured all resources into the development of the impossible. Faster than light travel, weapons beyond imagination, artificial intelligences so sophisticated that they could learn, adapt, and evolve with terrifying speed. Cities were constructed in the depths of the oceans and the vast expanse of space. Entire fleets of sleek black ships, powered by an unknown technology, were built to slip silently through the void. And all the while, the rest of the galaxy forgot. The Concord forgot. The other species, whose only connection to humanity was an occasional trade route or a brief diplomatic meeting, began to dismiss Earth as a failed project. Some even began to believe the rumors that humanity had destroyed itself in a fit of chaos. But that was exactly what humanity wanted them to think. Years passed, and the great silence between Earth and the galaxy stretched on. No ships came from Earth, no signals, no plea for aid. The people of the galaxy grew complacent, secure in their belief that the Terrans were an extinct species, confined to the forgotten reaches of space. Then, without warning, a ripple in the void. A single signal. A transmission to the Galactic Concord. It was brief, cold, and direct. The message read, "We have returned. Stay out of our way. Interfere, and we will erase you." The galaxy recoiled. That simple message, transmitted across all known frequencies, shook the foundations of everything they had built. The Concord, in all its arrogance, had never considered the possibility that humanity had not only survived, but thrived. That humanity had used its isolation to develop far beyond the primitive species they had once scorned. The Concord's first response was dismissive, until their scouts began disappearing. The vessels that had once roamed the stars to maintain the Concord's peace were now vanishing without a trace. No distress signals, no debris, no survivors, only silence. And that was only the beginning. The galaxy, once so confident in its dominance, now trembled in the wake of the Terran signal. It was the first clear sign that humanity had not only survived its exile, but had turned that isolation into a weapon. But it was a weapon unlike anything the Concord had expected, a weapon of sheer, silent resolve. For months, the Concord tried to dismiss the threat. They called it a bluff, a desperate cry from a species struggling for attention. But when the Concord sent a fleet of scouts to the edge of the Sol system, the truth could no longer be ignored. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The ships, sleek and designed for deep space reconnaissance, approached the outer boundary of human space. They were prepared to find Earth in ruins, a charred wasteland, or perhaps a planet crippled by civil war. Instead, they found nothing. No human ships, no debris, just an eerie stillness. The fleet moved closer cautiously. As they crossed into Earth's orbit, their sensors remained dead. Nothing they could detect seemed out of the ordinary, but there was an unsettling presence in the air, something ancient, something alive, that they couldn't quite understand. Then, the sudden realization. Earth was gone, completely. There were no signs of humanity, no space stations, no satellites, no signs of life. The Concord had believed the humans' technology was primitive. They had mocked humanity's attempts at interstellar travel. But the humans had one thing the Concord didn't: ingenuity. And in that ingenuity, they had developed a technology that could hide an entire planet from the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. Earth had vanished, leaving nothing but an empty, silent void. The fleet lingered in the darkness, waiting for orders, growing increasingly uneasy. And then the message came. It wasn't a call for peace, a diplomatic overture, or even a declaration of war. It was a simple broadcast, a transmission that cut through the darkness like a blade. In dozens of languages, ancient and new, the message repeated, clear and cold. "We have returned. Stay out of our way. Interfere, and we will erase you." The message was not a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. The Concord's response was swift, but perhaps, in hindsight, it should have been more cautious. They mobilized their forces, confident in their superior numbers, superior technology, and their ancient wisdom. They assumed the humans' boldness was nothing more than arrogance, the foolish bravado of a species that had nowhere to go but down. They sent their fleet to find Earth and teach these barbarians a lesson. What they found instead was something beyond their understanding. Human technology had advanced in ways no one could have imagined. Entire fleets of Terran warships appeared from the shadows, sleek, black, and built for a single purpose: to survive. But the Terrans weren't just survivors anymore. They were hunters. The Concord fleet was no match for them. The Concord's fleet entered the outer reaches of the Sol system, their ships gleaming under the light of distant stars. They were a powerful armada, led by the most advanced warships the galaxy had ever seen. Their mission was simple: find Earth, punish the humans for their insolence, show them who truly ruled the stars. The human threat had been underestimated. Again. The fleet's commander, Admiral Versus, a battle-hardened leader from one of the oldest species in the galaxy, barked orders to his subordinates. His mind was clear. This was going to be quick. Earth was a backwater world, its inhabitants unworthy of their existence in the greater galaxy. But as the fleet drifted closer to Earth's orbit, something felt wrong. The stars seemed colder, the vast emptiness of space more profound. There were no Terran ships in sight. No signals. No signs of life. "Bring us closer," Versus ordered. The massive ships surged forward, cutting through the darkness. But they encountered nothing but silence. No sign of the once vibrant human space stations. No satellite signals. No radiation from their planet's industries. Nothing. The fleet came to a halt. Something was out of place, but Versus couldn't put his finger on it. The sensors should have been able to detect Earth, its systems, its technologies. But there was nothing. The system was empty. And then, as the fleet hovered in the dead silence of space, the first ship appeared, a Terran vessel, a sleek, black craft, smaller than the Concord warships, but radiating an aura of silent menace. It emerged from the edge of the fleet's range, unnoticed until the last possible moment. Before the Concord fleet could react, more ships appeared, dozens of them, gliding out of the darkness like ghosts. The Terran ships were not like anything the Concord had seen before. They were far faster than their own, slipping through the stars with an unnatural grace. They were designed for stealth, for silence, for hunting. Versus' ship was the first to fire, its energy weapons lighting up the void. The blast was aimed directly at one of the Terran vessels, but it missed. The ship wasn't there anymore. It was already gone, evading the attack with a speed that defied logic. The human ships moved like shadows, slipping between the Concord vessels with deadly precision, cutting through the fleet's defenses as if they were made of paper. For every blast the Concord fired, a Terran ship was already gone, moving, striking, disappearing. The Concord fleet was chaotic, disoriented, and in full retreat, but there was no escape. The first Terran strike hit hard. A Concord warship was torn apart in a single blast. No warning, no time to react. It didn't explode. It vanished. The very fabric of the ship seemed to fold in on itself, as if it were never there to begin with. The Concord crew never had a chance to fire back. It was as if they had been erased from existence. Panic spread across the fleet. Versus stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. This wasn't war. This was something else, something worse. The Terrans weren't fighting. They were decimating them. Then, a voice crackled through the fleet's communications. It wasn't a message, but a command. Cold. Calculating. A simple statement. This is your only warning. The remaining Concord ships began to retreat, but it was too late. A second, more decisive strike came from the Terrans, and the remaining fleet vanished as the first had. The human vessels disappeared into the vast darkness of space, leaving only the eerie silence behind. The aftermath of the Concorde's defeat rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave, unsettling the foundations of the interstellar order. No one had expected humanity to be a threat, let alone a force capable of erasing entire fleets with cold efficiency. The Concorde, once the supreme governing body of the galaxy, now found itself in disarray. Its fleets had been decimated, its reputation shattered. The galaxy, once a playground for the powerful, was suddenly uncertain. But as the Concorde crumbled, a new force began to rise, quiet, powerful, and unwavering. Humanity had become something far greater than what the galaxy had anticipated. No longer just a rejected species on the fringe of space, they had become enforcers, silent, unseen agents of order in a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos. The humans were not conquerors. They had no interest in ruling the stars, no ambition to dominate other civilizations. Their goal was far more simple: peace. But peace for them meant absolute control over those who would disturb it, and anyone who threatened that peace would vanish. It started with rogue elements, pirates, mercenary bands, and warlords who had once thrived in the chaos of unregulated space suddenly found their reigns ending. Whole fleets of criminal syndicates vanished without a trace. Entire colonies that were known for their corruption and lawlessness became eerily silent. The galaxy's underworld, which had once flourished in the shadow of the Galactic Concorde's own fractured governance, suddenly found itself hunted. No one knew when the Terrans would strike. No one knew how. One moment, a pirate fleet would be operating without interruption, and the next, they would be gone. No survivors, no wreckage. One by one, the most notorious criminal factions across the galaxy found themselves erased, as if they had never existed at all. But the human enforcers didn't just target criminals. Entire systems that operated outside the borders of galactic law, systems that thrived on tyranny, greed, and oppression, began to feel the weight of humanity's judgment. A dictator's regime, once secure behind a powerful fleet, found itself unable to stop the Terran ships that slipped in and out of their system without warning. Rebel forces that threatened the stability of a neutral planet vanished into nothingness. The message was clear: cross the line, and we will correct you. Some factions attempted to resist. They sent their own fleets against the human ships, assuming that sheer numbers could turn the tide. But they were wrong. The Terran vessels moved like shadows, too fast, too silent to be caught. Their strikes were surgical, precision strikes designed to dismantle entire power structures in an instant. It wasn't just military might that made the Terrans so fearsome. It was the way they operated. Their tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. There were no negotiations, no diplomacy. No one had the luxury of understanding why they were targeted. Those who survived the first wave of attacks didn't live to ask questions. The Terran ships simply appeared, carried out their strikes, and vanished before anyone had a chance to retaliate. One thing was certain: the Terrans were now the final word in the galaxy. Their message had been delivered. The law of the stars would be defined by their rules. Across the galaxy, from the highest echelons of power to the forgotten fringes, every species began to take notice. The age of lawlessness was over, and in its place stood a silent, relentless force that would bring order at any cost. In the heart of the Galactic Concorde, the once mighty council chambers were alive with panic. The decision to send fleets to eradicate the Terran threat had failed spectacularly. The remnants of their forces were scattered, broken, and scattered in fragments across the galaxy, never to be reformed. In hushed tones, the remaining Concord leaders whispered of humanity's rise, not as conquerors, but as judges of the galaxy. They had dared to dismantle the very fabric of what had been thought unshakable. Now, there were whispers of betrayal in the halls, not of the humans, but of the Concord's own decision-makers, who had belittled the Terrans, assuming them to be weak and insignificant. If anything, this conflict had revealed a deep flaw in the Concord's judgment: their complacency, their arrogance. The Concord had become a fractured entity, a conglomeration of self-interested species vying for survival in the wake of the Terran onslaught. No one dared to question the Terrans aloud, but behind closed doors, alliances shifted like sand. For the first time in centuries, the foundation of the Galactic Concord, the idea that a unified, peaceful galaxy was the only way forward, was being called into question. Admiral Versus, one of the few leaders to survive the Terran strike, sat in a war room filled with the galaxy's most powerful military minds. His once calm demeanor was replaced by a quiet fury that only the most seasoned veterans could understand. His report on the human fleet was one of desperation. He'd seen it firsthand. Their technology, their tactics, the sheer precision with which they struck. It was all far beyond what the Concord had anticipated. "How long will we hide in the shadows, Versus?" One of the council members, a sleek insectoid figure named Korek, asked with a grim expression. "Our fleets are decimated, our planet's vulnerable. The Terrans don't negotiate. They don't talk. They eliminate. And what of the systems they've erased? What of those who've fallen?" Versus slammed his fist onto the table, his voice low but filled with a simmering rage. "We can't continue to sit idly by. We must strike back. We must fight for our place in this galaxy. The Terrans are a threat to us all, and we must destroy them before they erase us." But Korek shook his head. "And how do you plan on doing that? Their ships can move through the stars with the swiftness of ghosts. We have no technology that matches theirs. We cannot even track them. And what of the rest of the galaxy? Do you think they will stand by while we engage in another war that could bring total chaos to everything we've built? We can't fight this on our own." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to the elder member of the council, a being of pure energy known only as Sephin. The being's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and unshakable. "We are at a crossroads. The Concord cannot survive under the shadow of humanity's rise. Their message is clear. They are the law." The words hung in the air like an inevitable truth. The Concord had no power left to challenge humanity. The balance of power had shifted, and the galaxy now faced an uncomfortable reality. Humanity was no longer the insignificant species they once believed it to be. They had become something more, something final. "We are no longer the supreme power in the galaxy," Sephin continued. "We have two choices. We either submit to their rule, or we fight a war that will tear us apart." The galaxy held its breath. The eclipse of the Concord had begun, and in its wake, humanity stood poised to reign supreme. The galaxy was divided. The once unified front of the Galactic Concord had crumbled, leaving fractured coalitions of species and factions fighting to adapt to a new reality. In the corridors of power, discussions had turned to desperation. The truth was undeniable. Humanity had become a force that could no longer be ignored. But what to do about it? Across the stars, the stories of Terran supremacy spread like wildfire. Each new report from the front lines, from the fringes of the galaxy, only reinforced the same grim truth. Humanity was unstoppable, and they were not willing to make deals. They didn't care for treaties or agreements. To the Terrans, there was only one law: theirs. The Council of the Galactic Concord was no longer a voice of unity, but of dissension. Some wanted to surrender, to seek peace and accommodation with the humans. Others, more radical, whispered of war. The galaxy was still full of powerful forces, and surely, if they united, they could take on humanity, overpower them before they became too strong. One such figure was General Orvin, a battle-hardened leader from the Talsaran Empire, a species known for their brutal warfare tactics and colossal warships. He was a believer in the old ways, the belief that might made right, and that a galaxy ruled by force was one that could be controlled. In his mind, the Terrans were an aberration, a small rebellious species that had somehow stumbled into power. Their time was coming to an end. Orvin gathered a clandestine group of military leaders, those who were still loyal to the ideals of the Concord and to their vision of a peaceful galaxy. His message was simple: the Terrans will not stop until they control everything. We cannot allow that to happen. He sent out a covert transmission to the leaders of the few remaining Concord-aligned fleets, calling for a united front, a campaign to strike back at the Terran forces before they consolidated their power. We must attack now, while they are still divided, while they are still distracted. If we wait, they will be unstoppable. But not all agreed. Sephan, the ancient being of pure energy who had spoken at the last council meeting, had warned against further conflict. The Terrans do not play by the rules we understand. Sephan had warned. We are facing something far more dangerous than simple rebellion. They do not crave dominance. They crave peace in their own way. They will eradicate anyone who stands in their path, without hesitation. Many factions within the Concord had already been broken by the Terran enforcers. Entire systems, once controlled by corrupt governments, were now nothing but dust and ash. Entire fleets of mercenaries, smugglers, and warlords had vanished from existence as humanity's mysterious, silent strike force descended upon them with terrifying precision. The decision now lay with the few leaders left in the Concord. Could they resist humanity's rise, or would they bend the knee and accept the reality of a new order? Back on Earth, Captain Elias Harper, now a figure of myth and legend across the galaxy, sat at the heart of humanity's new government. His people had made their decision long ago. They would not bow to the Concord. The time for negotiation had ended. From his command center, Harper watched the galaxy unfolding before him, a galaxy that had ignored humanity, rejected them, and now feared them. The storm was coming, and humanity was ready to weather it. They had been underestimated, and now they were in control. The Terrans would not fall. They would rise. And this time, the galaxy would know their name. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of annihilation or evolution. The factions that had once defined the balance of power, from the mighty Galactic Concord to the numerous independent systems, now found themselves scrambling for survival in the wake of humanity's ascent. The Terrans, who had been cast aside as primitive exiles, had become the galaxy's final word. Their silent, relentless rise was the dawn of a new order, one that would reshape everything. Captain Elias Harper stood at the helm of the flagship Aegis, a massive ship forged from the same technology that had first erased the Concord fleets. Now this vessel represented humanity's purpose, to bring peace by force if necessary, and by any means possible. From here, Harper could see the shattered remains of the once glorious Concord, its leaders divided, and its fleets scattered. In the corridors of the Terran flagship, humanity's leadership had gathered in solemn conference. Harper, flanked by his top commanders, addressed the assembly. The galaxy was given a chance, he said, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of history. We were cast aside, ignored, and rejected, and we rose. Now we stand at the precipice of a new age. He paused, letting the words settle in the room. Every human in that room knew what they had built, what they had become, and every one of them understood that the galaxy would never be the same again. But what was their next step? Would they seize total control, enforcing their vision of peace with a hard hand, or would they offer the galaxy a chance to coexist under a new system? Harper's eyes turned to the display at the center of the room, an image of the fractured galaxy, dotted with both rebel factions and fearful Concord leaders. There were many questions now. Could they lead this galaxy to peace, or would they become the very tyrants they had once fought against? I offer them a choice, Harper continued. We will not seek domination for domination's sake, But we will not allow those who sow chaos to tear the fabric of this galaxy apart. The law of the stars will be written by those who stand for peace. Those who challenge it will be eradicated. The room was still, but it was the kind of stillness before a storm. Every Terran present knew what this meant. Humanity wasn't just an outsider anymore. They were the arbiters of fate. Elsewhere, on the outskirts of the galaxy, a final council was convening. The remnants of the Galactic Concord, broken but not yet entirely beaten, had come together for one last desperate attempt to save their empire. But they were no longer the force they once were. Without unity, without power, they were no match for the Terrans. Versus, the last surviving admiral, stood at the helm of a battered fleet. His eyes, once filled with unwavering confidence, now reflected a deep, bitter realization. The old order had ended. The galaxy had already moved on. The Concord's time was over. "Prepare for the end," he said softly, as he looked out at the incoming wave of Terran ships that filled the void like a dark tide. Harper's voice crackled through the fleet's communications, not with threats, but with finality. "You've lost. It's over. Surrender now, and we'll grant you mercy." The galaxy held its breath. What was left of the Concord fleet hesitated. But it was too late. The stars would never be the same again. Humanity had arrived, not as beggars, not as refugees, but as the supreme power of the galaxy. The Terrans would not simply survive. They would rule, and the peace they offered would be enforced by their unwavering hand. And so, with the final silence of the Concord's last fleet, a new era dawned. An era where humanity stood, unchallenged and supreme, ready to reshape the galaxy in their image.